I'm Teisha Bader, and in the news, a massive counter-terror operation in Jenin launched early Monday morning, July the 3rd, by the IDF and Shin Bet to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure in the refugee camp, known as a hotbed and a safe haven for Palestinian terrorists. And then a Palestinian terror attack in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, July the 4th, where 7 Israelis were injured. 2 of them remain in serious condition, including a pregnant woman who lost her baby as a result of her injuries. Then last night, 5 rockets were launched from Gaza toward Israeli territory, all intercepted, thankfully, by the Iron Dome. And also last night, an IDF soldier was shot and killed as Israeli forces began to leave Jenin after the 2-day operation. Well, to give us some perspective on this situation is former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Dani Ayalon. Dani, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time here to speak with us.
My pleasure, Teisha. Thank you.
So things are always complicated in Israel, Dani. This is a particularly tough week. Let's begin with this major counter-terror operation. And before anything else, if you can just give our viewers an idea of what Jenin is. We call it a refugee camp, etc. What is the reality of Jenin and its threat to Israel?
Well, a little bit of perspective, history. I would say that Jenin has always been a hotbed of radical Islam, even before the state of Israel was reestablished. Whether it was the British mandate, and certainly through the before the Independence War and after the Independence War. Jenin and Nablus, they are the northern part of Samaria, and the tribes there, the families there, the Hamulas there, always describe themselves mostly with Islamic Jihad and with Hamas. Now, with that said, after the agreements that we've had with the Palestinians, and they have taken upon themselves these commitments, obligations actually to mop up terror, to continue with consistent counterterrorism operations, but they have not. They have failed to do that. Not only that they are not countering terror and stopping terror, but they are encouraging terror, fortunately. Firstly, by incitement, and this is the most nefarious incitement that I've seen for years, whether it's in their schools, through their curriculum, in their what is called state-owned media, the Palestinian Authority media on the one hand, and secondly, through financial aid to the terrorists and their families. And you know that there is a tariff. According to the Palestinian legislation, the amount that they give terrorists is according to how many Israelis they killed. This is how it goes. And there is a special tariff if these are Jews from Jerusalem or other parts. It's just gruesome, it's cynical, and this is very, very unfortunate. Now, in Jenin itself, it has been a hotbed of terror, especially as the Palestinian Authority is nowhere to be seen over there. In the city of Jenin, just almost in the middle, there is an old refugee camp, if you can call it a refugee camp. What they have created was really bunkers and caches of enormous amounts of weapons, explosives, and even they tried to start a whole industry of rockets, just as they do from Gaza. In the last, Teisha, I would say 3-4 months only, 50 terror attacks came out of Jenin, killing about a dozen Israelis, and many shoot-ups on the roads, and ramming and stabbing, everything that you could just think of. So this Israeli mop-up operation was basically long overdue, and I'm glad to say that it was quite successful in the sense that over 120 terrorists were captured. About 12 were killed. They were all armed terrorists, and fortunately no collateral damage, in the sense that no uninvolved Palestinians were killed. and tons of explosives were captured as well. Laboratories of explosives and weapons were destroyed. And unfortunately, it was a very successful operation. Unfortunately, just in the last few hours, there was one Israeli killed, one Israeli from a special unit, and he was just buried today. But overall, I expect that the terror from Jenin will subside now, although there will always be some operations as they will try now to show that their motivation has not subsided. But Israel is geared for that. We are ready for that. And, Teisha, it's awful to have any loss of life. But I can tell you that without Israeli security presence in Judea and Samaria, our life here would have been just unbearable. And the fact that we can keep on living and doing our routine jobs and chores and everything else is because we have an excellent security forces, great IDF, wonderful intelligence, and this is what we will have to keep doing.
And Donnie, you mentioned the Palestinian terrorists. There were about 12 who were killed, were all armed terrorists and no civilian casualties. And the IDF stressing that this is its priority. It really, and it's such a challenge. As you mentioned, Jenin has a civilian population. It is a densely populated area. This is a very small area in square feet. And really, really a tough place to go in and carry out this type of an operation. And although there were civilian casualties, which is unfortunate, there were civilians hurt, which is unfortunate. There were no civilian casualties in this mission. Talk a bit about that challenge and how the IDF goes into such missions with that very strong imperative in mind.
Yes, it is a major challenge, and I would say that the operational paradigms for such a case is, first of all, use overwhelming force. When you use overwhelming force, actually you prevent any kind of out of control events, and you can kind of nip in the bud any skirmishes or explosives or terrorist shootings. Second thing is to use drones, and Israel is known, we have the best drones for precision. And when you have this drones overhead, also it's a very effective way to actually preempt any terror and be very, very like laser guided against only terrorist targets and avoid civilian casualties. Now here, it is very important to note that the Palestinian terrorists, just like in Gaza, they commit not one, but two war crimes. The first one is that they target Israelis, only civilian Israelis. This is the first war crime. The second one is that they use their own civilian as human shields. And, many of the caches of ammunitions and weapons were found in a mosque, in clinics, in schools, kindergartens. This is what we have to deal with. And this is what the world should know and understand. Unfortunately, we cannot rely on the Palestinian Authority. Again, they shirk all their responsibilities and commitments. So they're not a partner, not only not a partner for peace at this point, as they will not recognize Israel as the Jewish state and our right to be here in our homeland, but also not in counterterrorism. So we face basically two fronts with the Palestinians, the one in Judea and Samaria, mostly in the northern part of Samaria, which is Jenin and Nablus, and in Gaza.
And you mentioned, Donnie, what the world needs to see. Let's talk a bit about the media, which it's no surprise that media coverage here in the U.S., many of the mainstream media puts Israel in its headlines in not the best light. I'm just going to read this headline from the Washington Post, for example, which said, Israeli forces invade West Bank City, killing at least 8 Palestinians, period. This is the headline. And we know in today's world, people are just flipping through and scrolling down and seeing headlines, and that's it. They don't have any context. They have no they have no facts, really. They see this headline, and many like it, and they think, oh, Israel, again, the aggressor. Israel, again, going in and doing XYZ. There's no mention in that headline that they went into Jenin to root out terror, that the terrorists responsible for all these latest shootings and attacks in Israel, most of them came from Jenin. This is the headline we see. And again, it's no surprise, but that's yet another battle that we have to deal with in this situation. And it repeats itself all the time.
Yes, this is very unfortunate that today media is not really professional, unbiased, objective media. They all have agendas, unfortunately, political agendas, and they're wrong. They falsify the news, or they, in a way, they just convolute the truth, either by not telling the entire truth, either by misleading headlines. And this is what we see. What you have just quoted now from the newspaper is just awful. And the fact that they do not give the full picture, of course, is not helping the situation, because what they do is that they encourage the Palestinian terrorists to continue and double down on their attacks as they get cover from international media. This is very wrong, morally wrong, and I have no solution. Because we have been actually contending with this biased media, not just in the United States, but in Europe and other places. I'm not talking about the Arab states and Islamic states. We don't expect much for them, but from fellow or sister democracies, whether it's in Europe or in the United States, we would have expected a much more accurate and just depicting the full picture. And they do not. And then, it can go and just bite them as well, as we have seen terror activities in Europe by radical Islam. And I don't want to mention the 9/11, but we have to understand that we are all in the same battle. And for the radical Islam, whether it's ISIS or Hezbollah or Hamas or Iran, which is really the mastermind of all the terror activities here in the Middle East and beyond, for them, it's just a matter of priorities. Get the Jews first, get Israel first, and then go on westward, whether it's Europe and then America.
And of course, we had this terrible terror attack in Tel Aviv the day after the counter-terror op began. We have 7 Israelis injured, as I mentioned, 2 still in serious condition, 2 women who are sedated and intubated at the moment, and including a pregnant woman who lost her baby. In Tel Aviv, it always reverberates a little differently when it's in this bustling central city where it always feels like more of a surprise when things happen in the heart of Tel Aviv. But it's part of this wave in the last year or so of these kinds of attacks.
Right. And here probably we're talking about a copycat. Of course, our Shin Bet is looking into it, but so far it seems like that terrorist was not part of a major organization. It was like a lone wolf. These are the hardest to actually pin down and catch. And here, what he used, again, Israeli humanitarian attitude, where we allow Palestinians to come. First of all, dozens of thousands, like 70 or more thousand Palestinians come to work every day in Israel just for livelihood. 30,000 more coming from Gaza, because we do like to allow them real decent living conditions. In the case of this terrorist in Tel Aviv yesterday, his brother had a special pass for humanitarian reasons because he is a terminally ill person. So this terrorist actually used his brother's pass, probably, to come in. So, of course, we will have to get stricter regulations and checkups, but this is the way that these terrorists, they have no compunctions of using ambulances. As we mentioned, they use their own population for defense and for human shields. They would use ambulances. They would use any, the most lowest, morally characteristic attacks just to kill Israelis, just to kill Jews.
And at the same time, Donnie, it's so important that Israel continues to, have these humanitarian passes, as you say, and things like that. It's important to have these things and these measures to allow for people who need help to get their help. And as you said, it's really just a terrible situation that this terrorist used that to commit such a heinous act. Donnie, when you look at the big picture, if you can, of, it can seem like a cycle, right? That Israel does what it can to root out terrorists and goes into Jenin when it has to. And again, this is not a mission that is taken lightly. This is a very carefully planned. There is risk to IDF soldiers, but it is done when it is felt that is absolutely necessary. So we have to remember that. And then we have terror attacks, and then Israel has to go in and into Jenin or arrest terrorists. And then we have attacks that the terrorists say, well, this is in response to what you did to us. And then it seems like a cycle that we've seen for far too many years in Israel. It is a reality, unfortunately, but do you see any way to shift it at all, or to find a way so that this does not continue to be the case? Or is this just the reality of living in a country where you're surrounded by extremists who want to see your destruction? Not everyone, obviously, but there are elements, like you said, heavily in Jenin, who have this agenda. Can anything be changed?
Yes, this is a reality that sadly we have been used to it from even before the state was reestablished. But I guess this is the price for us to keep our freedom, to own our destiny and future in our own homeland. This is something that is not, God-given. It could be changed, but for that we need a new leadership at the Palestinians. At this point, what we have is really, we are in a conundrum. Why? Because the Palestinians are split in a terrible way. You have the Hamas headquarters in Gaza, and Hamas in 2007, actually they committed a coup against the Palestinian Authority. They took over Gaza, and this is where we have actually the a real basis of terror, which is sponsored and motivated and inspired and financed by Iran through Hamas and Islamic Jihad. In the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, we have the Palestinian Authority, which is also under a mortal threat by the Hamas. And I can tell you, Teisha, that without Israel's security presence in Judea and Samaria, the Hamas, just as they did in Gaza, they would have taken over Judea and Samaria and kicked out the Palestinian Authority in a few hours, just as they did in Gaza. And so at this point where you have Iran is the source of all terror in the Middle East, not only against Israel, where it's against the Sunni countries, whether it's Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, anywhere you have a real unrest and a real violence is the fingers of Iran, whether it's in Yemen, whether it's in Sudan, whether it's in Libya. Of course, we know Lebanon, Hezbollah, whether it's Syria or Iraq. So I would say if we look at the long run, look at the bigger picture, the best way to mop up all terrorism is to get at the head of the snake, if you will. And for that, we need to see a much more forceful policy towards Iran, whether sanctions, whether a credible military threat. And this has to be done by the entire international community. It's not just Israel's fight. Iran is a threat to the entire Middle East and much beyond. But this is one thing. On the other hand, at this point, we have to wait and see what will come out of this battle between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, which is, again, not our battle, and we are not to get involved there. And here we are probably at the doldrums of the I would say, the regime of Abu Mazen, who is now 88 years old, and already his lieutenants are gearing up for a battle for his succession. So we may have to see two phases. First of all, we'll have to see who will be the new leaders of the Palestinian Authority, with the hope that with them, they can be much more effective in counterterrorism, and then they can be a partner with Israel. And then we'll have to see how the Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority, the new regime there, sort out their differences with Hamas. And only then we can talk about a political process with the Palestinians. Israel would love to have peace with the Palestinians. We have had long battles, bloody wars with Jordan, with Egypt. Now we have a peaceful relationship with them. And we actually took upon ourselves and many concessions, painful concessions. We were ready to do the same with the Palestinians, but to no avail. And not too many people know about it, but during the Obama years, and John Kerry as the Secretary of State, when he tried to negotiate between Israel and the Palestinians, Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister, who was then also prime minister, was willing to go almost all the way to the 67 lines, with some swaps of land. But he asked one thing from Abu Mazen, the Palestinian leader, to recognize Israel as a Jewish state. And this is where it ended. That is where we hit just a dead end, a brick wall. The Palestinians would not do that. And until and unless they recognize our rights and really put an end to the conflict and to their claims, then we can really talk about some meaningful process. But unfortunately, this is not in the cards. There are many things that have to be actually put in place beforehand. Neutralize the Iranian threat, and then neutralizes the Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and then hopefully have a new and effective and not corrupt leadership of the Palestinians. And then you can really start a meaningful process. And until then, we will have to continue and guard ourselves as we have been doing.
Well, Donnie, thank you so much for all your wisdom, your perspective. Let us hope for more peaceful days ahead, more secure days ahead for the people of Israel and for the entire region. And hope to have you back on JBS. Your perspective is always so welcome and so appreciated.
My pleasure, Teisha, anytime.
Donnie Ayalon is former ambassador from Israel to the United States. We thank him so much for sharing his knowledge and his perspective with us here on JBS. And thank you, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, to our transmissions manager, John McDevitt, technical manager, Michael Paley, to our producer, Carol Lilienthal, and thank you for watching In the News.